Picture this. It's 11:59 p.m. The glow of your laptop screen is literally the only thing lighting up your dark room. You've been telling yourself, okay, I'll start in just 5 more minutes since dinner. And yet here you are staring at a blank Google Doc, just drowning in that heavy, familiar midnight guilt. You feel undisciplined, right? You feel lazy. But what if I told you everything you've been taught about procrastination is a complete lie? What you're experiencing right now, it isn't a character flaw. It's actually a hardwired evolutionary mechanism. And once you understand the hidden mechanics behind it, well, you can completely rewrite the code. So, are you actually lazy? The definitive, science-backed answer is no, absolutely not. When you avoid a massive task, like finally filing those taxes or starting that big pitch deck for work, your brain isn't being sluggish. It's actually working in overdrive. See, that complex project triggers some pretty heavy negative emotions. We're talking anxiety, self-doubt, maybe a deep fear of failure. And your brain, which has been wired over millions of years just to keep you alive, registers that emotional discomfort as a literal, physical threat. So what does it do? It triggers an escape hatch. Checking your phone, organizing your desk for the 5th time, or falling down a YouTube rabbit hole. Those aren't distractions. They're actually neurological survival responses. And wrapping your head around this requires a massive paradigm shift. Because here is the secret almost nobody is talking about. Procrastination is not a time management problem. I'll say it again. It is not a time management problem. You don't need another color-coded planner, you don't need a fancy new calendar app, and you definitely don't just need more discipline. When you procrastinate, you are managing your feelings by running away from them. You're simply trying to regulate your mood. If we stop treating this as a scheduling issue and start treating it as an emotional one, literally everything changes. And the scientific community has the hard data to back this up.
This isn't just some self-help theory either. In a landmark study, Dr. Fuchsia Sorois over at the University of Sheffield concluded that procrastination is fundamentally about mood regulation, not time. And the broader psychological community? They're in complete agreement on this. The real secret to overcoming procrastination isn't ironclad Navy SEAL-level discipline. It is simply learning to tolerate a brief, temporary spike of emotional discomfort just long enough to cross the starting line. So how exactly do we trick our brains into actually crossing that line? Well, the answer lies in a super fascinating psychological glitch.
It all starts with the 10-minute rule. Honestly, this is the single fastest, most effective way to short-circuit your procrastination in the moment. When you're staring down a massive, dreaded task, you give yourself a built-in out. You only have to work on it for exactly 10 minutes. You just set a timer on your phone, and when that alarm goes off, you are completely free to walk away. Zero guilt, no strings attached. What you're doing here is lowering the barrier to entry. You're taking it from climbing a terrifying mountain to just stepping over a tiny 10-minute hurdle. But here is the truly wild part about what happens at minute 11. Why does this 10-minute trick work almost every single time? Because it actively exploits an evolutionary quirk in our internal software known as the Zeigarnik effect. Psychologists discovered way back that our brains fixate on unfinished tasks way more intensely than finished ones. Think about how a catchy song gets stuck in your head. By sitting down for just 10 minutes, you crack open a mental loop. You cross the starting line, and that initial wave of emotional resistance just vanishes, replaced by this psychological pull toward completion. When that timer rings, you rarely even want to stop. Turns out, the hard part wasn't the work itself. The hard part was just starting.
And that psychological momentum leads us straight into our second strategy. It's captured perfectly by a famous piece of advice often attributed to Mark Twain. Eat a live frog first thing in the morning, and nothing worse will happen to you the rest of the day. Now, in the modern corporate world, your frog is that one dreadful task hanging over your head. It's the uncomfortable email you're afraid to send or that massive spreadsheet you're actively ignoring. The rule is incredibly simple. Tackle it first, before you open your inbox, before you check Instagram. Why? Because time isn't the only resource you're running out of as the day goes on.
You have to eat the frog first because of a biological reality known as decision fatigue. See, your willpower and your cognitive resources physically deplete with every single choice you make throughout the day. By 3 p.m., even deciding what to order for dinner on DoorDash can feel like a monumental, exhausting task, right? Your mental resilience is at its absolute peak first thing in the morning. If you leave your most emotionally demanding work for the afternoon, you are literally just giving it your exhausted leftovers. Do the hardest thing when your tank is totally full, and I promise you, the rest of the day becomes almost effortless. But, speaking of willpower, we really need to address a massive societal misconception here. What if relying on willpower is exactly why you are failing? We're constantly sold this myth that highly productive, successful people just have a stronger sense of discipline than the rest of us. But willpower isn't a personality trait, it's a battery. Every single time your phone buzzes on your desk and you force yourself not to look at it, you drain a little bit of that battery. Relying purely on willpower is a losing game from the start.
So instead of fighting temptation, you have to engineer an environment where distraction is physically impossible. This is method 3, remove escapes. Put your phone in another room, and no, placing it face down on your desk absolutely does not count. Use app blockers like Cold Turkey or Freedom to literally lock yourself out of addictive websites. Tell a coworker or a roommate that you're going dark for an hour to create some instant social accountability. The most productive people out there don't have magical willpower. They just stop relying on it. They make starting the path of least resistance.
Which brings us to a concept that directly challenges modern hustle culture. Can forgiving yourself actually make you work harder? When we slip up, like when we accidentally lose a whole hour doom scrolling on TikTok, our very first instinct is brutal self-criticism. We tend to believe that guilt will be the ultimate motivator to whip us back into shape. But what if that guilt is actually the very lock keeping you trapped in the procrastination cycle?
Research published in the Personality and Individual Differences Journal reveals a really surprising truth. Immediate self-forgiveness actually reduces future procrastination. Remember what we talked about earlier? Procrastination is an avoidance of negative emotions. And guilt? Guilt is one of the heaviest negative emotions we can possibly experience. When you beat yourself up, you're just creating more negativity, which ironically makes your brain want to escape even more. It's a vicious spiral. So when you get distracted, simply tell yourself, okay, I got distracted, it's over, I'm starting now. Drop the baggage. It costs 0 willpower, and it breaks that negative spiral instantly.
Finally, we have to confront those awful moments when you sit down to work and feel completely, utterly paralyzed. Psychologists call this task aversion. It's an intense emotional resistance triggered when a project's scope is simply too vague or just way too massive. Your brain looks at this giant goal, completely panics at the perceived energy it's going to take, and just shuts down entirely. The only known cure for task aversion is a strategy of radical simplicity.
You have to shrink the task until it literally stops feeling like a threat. If you write "work on tax returns" on your to-do list, your brain triggers an alarm. It's just way too big. But if your task is simply open the tax document and type in my name, that is microscopic. The smaller the action, the less fear your brain generates. You aren't tricking yourself here. You are giving your nervous system a safe, non-threatening entry point. Don't plan to go do a grueling hour at the gym. Just commit to putting on your gym shoes. Make that very first step so radically simple that it feels completely ridiculous to say now.
Let's recap, because this is huge. Procrastination is not laziness. It is emotional avoidance. And the fix isn't to punish yourself, it's to outsmart your own biology. Use the 10-minute rule to break that initial inertia. Eat the frog when your cognitive energy is at its absolute peak in the morning. Engineer your environment by removing all escape routes. Forgive yourself quickly to kill the guilt spiral dead in its tracks. And practice radical simplicity to make your first steps feel totally effortless. The version of you who succeeds isn't some superhuman future self. It's just you, right now, equipped with the exact right psychology.
We spend so much of our lives waiting for the perfect mood to strike before we start, not realizing that taking action is what actually creates the mood in the first place. You now have the mechanical blueprints to bypass your brain's evolutionary traps. So the only question left is, which of these methods will you use to reclaim your time today? Seriously, pick just one right now and apply it to something you've been avoiding for the last 5 minutes. Take the control back. If this shifted your perspective, let me know down in the comments which strategy you're going to start with. Thanks so much for learning with me today.